Yeah, good morning, all of you. So today, I'd like to discuss about regarding the sample design and its types. And this is Dr. Jayaprakash, Associate Professor, HOD, Department of Business Analytics. And in this context, I'd like to discuss about the sample design. Just sample design, characteristics of a good sample design, types of sampling design, and then what are the terminology we are using in this. What is sample design? Sample, just to see, better to know about it, the two terms and terminology here, population and sample. Population is nothing but our universe aggregating of animates or inanimates in that is living things or lifeless things. Nothing but population. Population means not only the people in this context, we taken into consideration for all, no, animates or inanimates, like living things or non-living things. A sample is nothing but a finite subset of the population. You remember that population may be finite or infinite. So, for example, the number of cars manufactured by Maruti company or any company, every unit manufacturing from the company, so normally it is countable. Or the safety pins manufactured by a particular concern, a particular company, it is not possible to count the number. It is only weighing that particular sample safety pins. Right. So that is that what here the population, finite or infinite. Sample is always you drawn from the population, and it must be finite, a finite subset of the population. And there are two types of surveys normally you can follow. One is census survey. The second one is sample survey. Census survey, or you can also term it as complete enumeration technique. Complete enumeration technique. That means each and every unit in the population is studied. Is nothing but here census survey. It's very time consuming and tedious. Lot of manpower is required, and more money is also required for conducting the data or survey or inquiry regarding this census survey. Very big organizations or the government of India can perform the population study if it is required. And most of the companies or firms follow the sample design or sample survey. It is more economy and scientific way you can go, and less administrative expenses, or compiling is also very easy when compared to the population data compiling. But if you draw the sample and then study regarding that particular sample, based on the results of the sample, that will be extended to the population. That is the main motto of the sample units. Some of the techniques you have to follow, must follow only sample study. Say for example, well, the military weapons are effectively worked or not, you can test is only one or two. In such a cases, we have must follow only sample study, right? A definite plan for obtaining a sample from a given population, and it refers to the technique or a procedure that researcher would adopt in selecting items from the sample. What is the type of technique you have to adopt? There are several types of sampling techniques are there, and the characteristics of a good sample design. So the design must result in a truly representative sample, and the design must be which such that the results in a small sampling errors. Errors may be, obviously it may be incurred, but you have to minimize the error. So small errors is only that, in that case you can go for that. Sample design must be viable in the context of funds available for the research study, and sample design must be such that the systematic bias can be controlled in a better way. Bias, if it is a bias is there, then you have to minimize the bias. Don't use the bias. Unbiased way is always give the good results. And then it's showing that sampling design, just to see that, and representative representation bias, yeah, probability sampling, non-probability sampling. And in the selection of the technique is also unrestricted sampling, restricted sampling. In the probability sampling, we simply termed as simple random sampling and complex random sampling such as cluster sampling, systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, multi-stage sampling, etc. In non-probability sampling, normally we call it as hazard sampling or convenient sampling. And in the another context, we can also call it as purposive sampling, is nothing but here quota sampling or area sampling, etc. And terminology, right? Okay, that you call it as here, see, probability sampling is based on the concept of the random selection. Non-probability sampling is nothing but here when a sample element is drawn individually from the population at large, then the sample so drawn is known as unrestricted sample, whereas all other forms of sample are converted under the term restricted sampling. And see, non-probability sampling. And what are the non-probability sampling we had to go for that? In this sampling procedure, which does not afford any bias for estimating the probability that each item in the population has the being included in the sample. But non-probability sampling is also known as a different names such as deliberate sampling, purposive sampling, judgment sampling. And see, what is deliberate or purpose? In this type of sampling, items from the sample are selected deliberately by the researcher, by his choice, the researcher's choice. In the items remains, and the considering the items remains supreme. What he has to select, that you can go for that. So purposefully, deliberately, he can select that particular items, but there is no mechanism for that. What is his in his mind, then obviously he can apply directly. But what is the advantage for this? A small inquiries and researchers by individuals, this design may be adopted because of the relative advantage of time and also money inherent in this method of sampling. That may be advantage, but disadvantage is there is always a danger of bias entering into the this type of sampling techniques. Why? Because deliberately he selected the sample, and sampling errors in this type of sampling cannot be estimated. This sampling design is rarely adopted in large inquiries of importance. And quota sampling, under quota sampling, the interviewers are simply given quotas to be filled from the different strata. Strata means a subgroups, and the entire population you can convert into subgroups, and based on that with some restrictions how they are to be filled. It's just nothing but here the quota. What is the advantage for this? This type of sampling is very convenient and is relatively inexpensive. That is the advantage. Okay, probability sampling is also known as random sampling or chance sampling. Chance is nothing but here probability or a chance. Under this sampling design, every item of the universe has an equal chance of inclusion in the sample. So for example, if you the size is small and if you select this random sample, you can give the numbering from 1 to n, and you can draw the chits here. See, you can pick up one number among that. Every number has the equal chance, or every person in that particular group is the equal chance, like a lottery method in which individual units are picked up from the whole group, not deliberately, but by some mechanical procedure, some procedure. And what is the advantage for this? We can measure the errors of estimation. What is the error we will get it? You can estimate. The sample will have the same composition and characteristics. And in that, it's right, simple random sampling. So simple random sampling, you can also, there are two ways you can draw: simple random sampling with replacement and simple random sampling without replacement. And in this method, each possible sample combination are equal probability of being picking up, and each item in the entire population to have an equal chance of being included in the sample. As I already mentioned, every unit in the population has equal chance in the sample, nothing but here simple random sampling. So this applies to sampling without replacement. Once an item is selected for the sample, it cannot be appear in the sample design again. With replacement is used less frequency, in which the procedure that element selected for the sample is returned to the population before the next element is selected. Before draw the next number, the first drawn is also put into the in that particular again in the group. In such a situation, the sample element could appear twice in some sample before the second element is chosen. And in the complex situations, we can also call it as a mixed sampling. And probability sampling under restricted sampling techniques may result the complex random sampling designs. Such designs may well be called mixed sampling designs. For many of such designs may represent a combination of probability and non-probability sampling processes in a selection of sample. It's a combination of both random and so what are the types of here say systematic sampling, stratified random sampling, and cluster sampling, area sampling, multi-stage sampling, sequential sampling. Stratified random sampling, systematic sampling, cluster sampling, these are the different types you can use here. See, so systematic sampling means here say in systematic sampling only the first unit is selected randomly and the remaining units of the sample are selected in at fixed intervals. That means before draw that only first element you have to draw, the interval you have to fix. It is easier and lesser costlier method of sampling can be conveniently used even in case of large populations. Systematic sampling is used when list of population are available and they are of considerable length. The interval if you prefix, then you can draw it is systematic sampling. On the other hand, stratified random sampling. So under stratified sampling, the population is divided into several subpopulations. They are individually more homogeneous than total population. The different subpopulations are called stratas, and then we select items from each stratum to constitute a sample. So stratified random sampling results is more reliable and detailed information. So sometimes and the entire population you can divide into stratas, subgroups. We simply call it as subgroups. So from each subgroup you can draw. So that is nothing but here stratified random sampling. Cluster sampling is the total population is divided into number of relatively small subdivisions like stratas, but it is a subdivisions which are themselves cluster of still smaller units, and then some of these clusters are randomly selected for inclusion in the whole or overall the sample, and the samples are usually more reliable per unit cost. That's why here cluster sampling you can go for that. And area sampling, it clusters happen to be some geographic subdivisions. In that case, cluster sampling is better known as area sampling. In other words, cluster designs where the primary sampling units represent a cluster of units based on geographic area are distinguished as area sampling. Then you can divide into that. And the next one is multi-stage sampling. Multi-stage sampling is a further development of the principles of cluster sampling. For example, suppose we want to investigate the working efficiency of nationalized banks in a particular country. We want to take a sample of few banks for this purpose. Not like that, multiple sampling. If you identify the first stage, you can identify the what you called. Suppose if you select state, once you select the state, the under state we have so many districts, you select the district. Under the district you have so many mandals, you select the mandal. Under the mandal we have so many villages, you select the villages. Under the village we have so many households and you pick up the households from that. So households, village, mandal, district, state, these are the stages. You can draw that particular sampling units. And the next one is a sequential sampling. The utilization size of the sample under this technique is not fixed in advance, but it is determined according to the mathematical decision rule on the basis of information yields as a survey progresses. This is usually adopted in the case of acceptance sampling plan in context of statistical quality control. Yeah, normally you can statistical quality control. There is another good topic in that. Later we'll see. When a particular lot is to be accepted or rejected on the basis of the single sample is known as a simple sampling. When the decision is to be taken on the basis of two samples is known as double sampling. And in case of decision rests on the basis of more than two samples, but the number of samples is restricted. Here they decide in advance the sampling known as multi-stage sampling. So these are that, but when the number of samples is more than two, but it is neither certain nor decided in advance, this type of system is known as sequential sampling. Thank you.